What is going on, everybody? This is going to be a run through of how to set up a very cheap data pipeline with Mage AI. And then at the very end, if you want to stick around, I'm going to talk a little bit about BigQuery, clustering, partitioning, a little bit about data modeling, but the bulk of this is just going to be setting up the pipeline and making it as inexpensive as possible. So let's jump right in. So here I am in GCP, and first thing we want to do is set up a compute engine. So I'm just going to go to VM instances and just create a new instance. I'll just call this Mage Demo. E2 is fine. 4 gigs of memory will probably work for this. At least it did when I tested. For the boot disk, 10 gigs is fine as well. We are going to change the OS version. I like to use Ubuntu, and I tend to like Jammy these days. I'm going to do the regular x86-64 LTS. You could probably go with the minimal as well, but you will need to install Git, I believe. So let me select that. And I'm just going to pull up a terminal, and I'm going to reuse a key that I already have set up. If you need to set up an SSH key, that's a quick Google search away. You'll just need to put that in your .ssh directory, and you will need to copy the public key. So I'm just going to copy this, and down here in advanced options, I'm going to go to security, manage access, and add my SSH key there. Let's see, I believe that's all we need to do here. If you notice, it's going to be about $25.46 a month, 0.03 cents hourly, and I will try to keep that in mind for later. We just need to go ahead and create. And we just need to wait until we have an external IP address here. And while that's loading up, I'm going to go ahead and go to my GitHub. And let's see. Docker Compose install, and I'll post a link to this down in the description. This is just going to be a bash script. I just pretty much copied and pasted all of the commands. If you Googled and went to Docker on how to install Docker and Docker Compose, we won't really need Docker Compose for this project, but it doesn't really hurt to have installed. And I have a video of how to install that step by step, and I will try to remember to post a link to that down in the description as well. So, okay, here we are, and I'm just going to copy the external IP address, and I'm going to edit my config file. Not much to it, you just give it a shorthand name here. I'm going to go over to the host name and paste the IP address. Just make sure that the username matches what is at the end of your public key file, and that this is pointing to the right private key. So we can just Control X, Y, and enter to save that, and we can test that out like so, just using the shorthand name that was at the top of the config file. Which was here. Okay, so let's head on over to Visual Studio. And it's automatically opening up that remote. If you do not have remote SSH installed, you can just go to extensions here, remote SSH. You'll just want to install that. Then down here, you'll have this greater than, less than. Click that, connect to a host, and that will give you the little shorthand names that we saw in the config file. Okay, so from here, we can go ahead and git clone. And I'm just going to head back over to the repository here and grab that link. And cd into the Docker Compose install. We just need to modify that file to make it executable. Oh, actually, I think it's install Docker. There we go. And we'll just run that. And that'll just take a moment or two. And I still haven't figured out quite why, but this command at the end should do the same as logging you out, logging you back in, let you use Docker, but I ran into some issues, but when I shut down and restarted the VM, it worked. So turn it off, turn it back on, works a lot of the time. And we can test that. Docker run hello world. All right. And just so there's no hiccups, I'm just going to go ahead and close and reopen Visual Studio Code. Hopefully that reconnection will sort out any issues we might run into. And for no particular reason, I'm just going to open up my home directory. I just like seeing it on the left here. Don't think we will even be using it. This is leftover, so I can go ahead and get rid of that. We'll recreate it here. Okay. So I'm going to make a directory for our project, and I'm just going to call that Mage Demo. And cd into it. And we will go to Mage.ai. Start building. And we just want to go down and look for the Docker command. Okay. And if you're not familiar with Docker, you really should be, but it's not too hard to parse what's going on here. Basically, it's running it as an interactive terminal. It's forwarding port 6789 to our host machine from Docker. It's mounting the present working directory, which in our case would be Mage Demo, to home source in the Docker container. This is the image that it's pulling, and the command line arguments are this run app.sh, Mage start, demo project. A few things I'm going to change here. I'm actually going to call this Mage Demo, and let's see. Oh, it won't let me go up a line. Let's see, can I cut this. No. You know, I'm going to Control C. I'm going to open up a text editor. Make it one line. And I'm just going to restart. I think that's the right syntax. Might need an equals in there. Permission denied. Let's see. So I am running into those issues I was worried about. Maybe we'll sort through those as we go on. But for now, let's keep moving. Control-Shift-V to paste. And that will just take a few minutes there. So while that's running, there are a few things I would like to do. So we are going to need a service account to put our data into BigQuery. So I just want to find IAM. We're going to do service accounts. We will create one. Mage service account works. And we'll just give it BigQuery admin. And we're going to manage keys, add key, create a new key. JSON is fine. And that should be in my downloads folder. And you can see I've done this a few times. What we can do is we're just going to SCP, which is how to move files with SSH. And actually, I want to make sure that's the right one, so I want to see the dates on those. Okay, so today is the 31st, so I actually want this one here. So SCP Chicago 9E. And I'm going to put that to the connection in the config file. And let's see, Mage demo. And I'll just call that Google credentials.json. Okay. Now if we go over here, we should see we have our credentials on our VM. This is running here. If you do not have a port forward, which you probably do not, 6789 is the one given in the example, so we'll just go with that. And that's fine to share statistics. And I'm just going to rename this real quick to Mage Demo. And that should be fine. So we'll go into this pipeline. They've given us some nice examples here. So we can edit the pipeline. All that looks good. And And I just want this first data loader. I'm just going to call this, I don't know, get crime data, enter to update that name. If you just click out of it, it'll stay the same. And I really should have had this open before, so in another window, I'm going to find the URL that I want. Just need to paste that in here. And this is from the Chicago Data Portal. I do have another video showing how to sign up and make an app token there. I'll post that link down in the description as well. And that should just take a moment. All right. And we got 95,172 rows. So that's how many crimes have been recorded in Chicago in 2023 as of May 31st, which seems reasonable. But if we go ahead and we can check columns, I like this feature. We can just do a scratch block, and by default, I think it's just called DF as it's passed from block to block here. So there's our date, and I can look at the types. But we notice that date and updated on are both objects, and we're going to want those to be date times. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this block, and I want to do a transformer. And I have not had too much luck with the reformat and converting it to date time, so I'm just going to go with generic and call this fixed dates. I think that's fairly descriptive, although you could do more transformations there. Just to keep everything kind of uniform, I'm just going to switch those to DF. You could leave it as data, but then this here, instead of DF, you would want to use data. And to convert to date time, I want to import pandas as PD. Nice little autocomplete feature there. Actually, I might as well just go ahead and convert all of these to lowercase and replace the spaces with underscores. It just makes it a little bit neater. So then I can just do something like df date equals to date time df date. And just to be a little bit lazy, I'm going to go ahead, and this should be updated on now and updated on. And while that's running, I'll just make a scratch pad, and I just want to see those types. Again, a little bit of an issue here. We notice that it's actually converted it to epoch time. Again, I kind of struggle with the dates there, but When it goes to BigQuery, BigQuery is smart enough to recognize the epoch time and convert that back into a more human readable time. So if we run now, we see date time and date time. So now it's time to load to BigQuery. A few things that we will need to do. First, we need to come down here to the config file. And we are looking for Google service account. Actually, we can go ahead and control whack to comment all that out. This is in the same directory that we're in, the Mage data. And if we wanted to, we could do a new terminal, docker ps. Not sure why I've got to do that every time, and I'm too lazy to reboot, so let's just go with it. We want to get the container ID here. We just need the first 3 characters. Nice little shortcut there. We want an interactive terminal. And I just want to make sure that the Google credentials JSON file is in fact in the container. And we see it is in fact there. All right. So now back in our config, we can just do Google credentials like that. And Control S to save that. Close that out. And we want a data exporter Python, and we are going to Google BigQuery. Just call that export to BQ for BigQuery. And let's see, your project, your data set, your table name. So default config is fine. A few things we need to check here. First, you notice that this is your human readable project name, but we actually want to go to the dashboard and get the project ID here. So we can just copy that, and that is in fact my project. And then we will head over to BigQuery. And we want to create a data set. Mage demo. I should probably be naming that something different. I feel like I've used that name 3 times. But then here we can just do Mage demo. And we'll call this Shy Crime 2023. All right, that all looks good. And if exists, replace, meaning all the data is going to be wiped out, and then replace with the data that's coming in. There's probably one other thing we would want to do. Let's see, create pandas column with current date. And you can see I've been here before. 2 little pieces here. And this is just, if we leave this running, we want a way to check that it is actually updating. So we could call this insert date. We'll go ahead and move this up towards the top just to keep everything kind of in order. and that was that stray space I had there. Let's try that again. Okay. And it is indeed May 31st today, so that worked. And let's try the BigQuery insert. Looks like it worked well. All right, nothing there. Let's see if we have refresh contents. There we go. And we just want to query that. We could do the top 10. See our data there. We do a count. Nine five one seven two. If we go back and look at how many rows were returned, 95172. So that looks good. Let's see. So if we want to set this up to run automatically, this is a very small and short pipeline. What we can do here in Mage is we can do triggers, create a new trigger. We'll make it a schedule, load Chicago crime data, and I want that to run daily. Starting today is fine. And I'm not sure why that's not giving me the option. To set the time that it runs. That's a little confusing. Let me go ahead and I will make that active. Okay, so I believe it will run at this time every day. Just notice that that is in UTC time. So take that into account. You can look up the current UTC time, compare it to your time zone, and then you kind of know what offset you'll want. So for me, I'm on Chicago time. If I do UTC time now, it's 10:41 p.m. So if I wanted to run that at noon, I would, well, let's see. An easier way would probably be UTC to CST difference. So it looks like that is 5 hours ahead. So if I wanted it to run at noon, I would want to set that for 7 a.m. Is that right? Yeah. So we can just go down here. And set that to 7 a.m. Oh. And that's actually the wrong trigger. But that's okay. I can just delete that one. Chicago crime data. Okay. So it says it's running. So that's probably because I put the start date and time before the actual date and time, so it thinks it needs to catch up. And while that's going, I'm going to go back to VMs and I'm going to make a schedule. Leaving that is fine. Instance schedules, create an instance schedule. Run Mage VM. Looks like it wants dashes instead of spaces. That's fine. Should probably give that a friendlier name. Start time. When you have a schedule, it can take up to 15 minutes for a VM to come up. I've noticed it takes about 6 minutes. So because I am doing this at noon Central Time, I probably want to set this to 11:43. And that should definitely be done by, let's say, 12:05. So that's when the VM is going to start. That's when it's going to stop. For the time zone, I'm in the United States. And I want Chicago time. There we go. Initiate date. Today is fine. Oh. You know what? I don't even think that's required, because if empty, it will take effect immediately. I want to run that every day. If you want extra cost savings, you could do that weekly. Submit. And then I'm just going to go ahead and in here, I'm going to add an instance to the schedule. There are my instances. Want this to apply to Mage Demo. Oh no. Compute engine system service account service 10533. It needs compute instance start and compute instance stop permissions. So for that, we are going to head over to IAM roles. And you can see I've tested this out a little bit. I'm just going to do a new role. And Mage schedule. Mage schedule. We want to add permissions down here, not here. That's very confusing. We want compute instances dot start, and we can go ahead and make it an or compute instances dot stop, and we want both of those. And so now we have our role created. We're going to go back to IAM, actually service accounts. Oh no, IAM. And we want to include Google provided role grants. So that's going to give us the service account we're looking for, which should be It can be misleading because we do have one up here that looks the same, but here you notice we have the service in front of it. And we just want to go ahead and edit. Oh, and you should have custom here. And I'll just set that to the one we just created and save. Now we can go back to our VM instances and attach a VM to that schedule. Okay, so just to recap, we can go ahead and shut down this VM now. It's going to start at 11:43 a.m. every day. Probably take about 6 minutes to come up, but it can take up to 15 minutes, which would put us at 11:58. Then we have a trigger on Mage, and that's why we use the restart always. When the VM comes up, that container is going to start. And then it's going to get triggered at noon, and it's going to pull our data down into a data frame, add a column, fix the date columns, and then load it into BigQuery. Then at 12:05 p.m., the VM is going to shut down. So if we think back, I don't know, let's just call that half an hour. And so it was 25 and some change. We'll just call that 26 divided by 30 days in a month, divided by 24. Okay. So you think, and running for half hour, so that would be our price per hour. Multiply that by 15. And I don't think we even have enough data to really be charged in BigQuery. So you're probably going to come in under $1, maybe a little over, probably a little under. Okay. So the other thing I want to talk about is improvements. So if we go back to BigQuery here, and we look at our data, and we can just do that's our data set. So if I open up a query here and just take a look, and we can look at the results here. So we see that epoch time was in fact converted into a human readable date time format. We can see we have IDs here and case numbers. You might want to look into primary keys, although because this is replacing the table, in this case you would maybe put the primary key in afterwards, although that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You could adjust Mage to just add new rows and have a primary key on this table. Let's see, going across, you could kind of factor these out into other tables, make a dictionary, make each one of these descriptions, 1, 2, and then just store that integer there and have a separate table to look those up when you need them. Same with primary type. I was Googling around a little bit because I'm not actually too familiar with it, but it seems like the integer type and the string type are pretty comparable unless it's a very long string. So in a traditional relational database, that might make more sense than it would here in BigQuery. Here you can see the ward is actually a float, we would probably want to handle that back in our pipeline. When we did our transformations, we would want to make that an integer just to make sure of that. And let's see. I'd say that's about it. You could do some data enrichment as well. So say you're gathering weather data. Well, maybe you could put that in a separate table and combine it. Maybe crime is related to weather somehow, or the unemployment rate, or any other factors you can think of that might impact that. And as I was saying, this is columnar storage, meaning these are stored as columns as opposed to row data, which this here, all these columns, these fields would be a row. And with columnar storage, it's a bit different because rather than indexes, you have more partitions and clustering. So if we can go out to Google and look at clustering and partitioning, you can see you can only cluster on certain types of data, and we do have date times in there, so that might be a good one. And let's see, this is clustering here, and you can see this is partitioned by the date time, but then it's clustered by country. So the countries appear next to each other, and that is one faster. So when you execute a query, it knows where to look and doesn't have to read as much data in. Our data set in this case is a bit small to really see the effects of that, I believe. But if you wanted to do something like that, this might get you going. I do have a query saved here, and this is actually going to be our table name here. So we could just create a table and make it clustered, and we will cluster on which column? The date column. And I think that might be a bit different now. And unclosed identifier literal, usually that means missing a quote or it wants you to remove a quote. Let's see here. Let's see if it likes that better. That all looks fine. Maybe it doesn't want these quotes. Oh, is not found in location US. So I think our issue here is it is in the location US. Let's see if we can work through this real quick. Oh, this was left over from when I was running through making everything worked, and that kind of tripped me up. Okay. So now we have a table that is clustered on date. I went ahead and ran through this a bit And I did not notice a whole lot of gain with clustering in this case. If you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of rows or more, you're probably going to see more of a performance improvement there. Again, this is really just how to set up a Mage pipeline. It's going to be very cheap. You could have used other data, of course, and maybe just use this as a template. I will post a link in the description to the clustering and partitioning. I think these are very important concepts. I just don't have to use them day to day. And honestly, I've had to go through 4 or 5 refreshers every time I want to mess with them. But maybe one day that will stick. But that's all I have for this video, and I will see you in another one.